Life Audio.
Hey, welcome to our new God's Love for the Unlovable and Gospel Rant series and format. We're calling it Vagabond Diaries. I mean, it's still Gospel Rant. We want it to be informative, fun, life-changing, relevant, something that you would find valuable and pass on to others, laugh and cry a little. And instead of dealing with biblical topics from a scholarly perspective, verse by verse, word by word, precept by precept, we're going to shift for a time to telling the biblical stories in a new way. Insightful ways, we hope, that are foundationally biblical, gospel immersed, relevant, and by the way, entertaining. We're not above satire, sarcasm, made up characters, mockery, even political insights where necessary. And the idea is to get the powerful point across to make us see God's love for the unlovable, the unloved, and the unlovely different. Shake things up a bit. And since it's a rant, we're not worried about being too politically correct. Our goal is to make us, help us, cause us to see truth through a different lens. And then let's get the dialogue going. Think of C.S. Lewis, Chronicles of Narnia. Think Tolkien. The idea is over and over we want to scream out and present God's love is always for the unlovable, the unloved, and the unlovely. And that's all of us on any given day, if we were just a little bit honest. I mean, isn't that appealing and frightening? That's the heart of the gospel. I need to hear it all the time, over and over. The idea of the Vagabond Diaries comes from my experience writing my newest published trilogy, award-winning trilogy for young readers, 10 to 16. It's called Kingdom Quest. They read like teen fantasies, and they are, by the way, but it's the gospel in a nutshell for young readers. Someone described it as Chronicles of Narnia meets Princess Bride. Yeah, it's filled with quirkiness and humor, and I think adults will like it. It's a little quirky, don't get me wrong, but it's a fun quirky. And that's our goal at Vagabond Diaries, the series now at Gospel Rant. Thank you for all of those who have followed us. The Vagabond Diaries is going to show and tell the biblical principle in a unique narrative form. Let me know what you think. Feedback, bill at gospel-app.com. In today's Vagabond Diary, we're going to meet Charlie, an addict, a surprising addict, but it's going to be interesting to learn, I think, what he is addicted to. You'll see what I mean. Let's have some fun. Welcome to God's Love for the Unlovable and Gospel Rant. We'll get back to this week's Vagabond Diary, Charlie, after this message from our sponsors. Don't go anywhere. This is Charlie. Hey, y'all, I'm Charlie. Hey, Charlie, said the audience together in unity. So I don't know how to start. I'm not used to doing this. You're doing fine, said one man who had met Charlie at the stale donut table earlier and welcomed him cheerfully to the meeting. Thomas was one of the mentors here, it seemed. We've all been in your seat. Just speak your story, man. Charlie had met Thomas when he arrived in the church basement earlier. Thomas was one of the organizers of the addicts group. The Stark basement was packed tonight. Men, women, queer and straight. Some who were obviously very poor, likely homeless, Charlie thought. Others were in expensive suits. It was a bigger crowd as many had come to hear tonight's speaker in the upstairs church. That's what they called it. There were even a few migrants from El Salvador, Nicaragua, countries in Africa and China, Thomas told Charlie. Like most addiction groups, the coffee was lukewarm and instant. The donuts were stale, but the people didn't come for the snacks. They came out of a sense of need, deep personal need. For some reason that Charlie couldn't recall at this moment, he had volunteered to share. Right, my story. Okay, so I guess I'll start with my pops. He's gone now. Boy, he was something else. I mean, everyone loved my old man. They feared him too, I later found out, but everyone wanted to be with him. He had this magnetism, I guess. He just made people feel better. At least that's what I thought growing up. I've since found out that he had a bit of a dark side. There were a lot of people who actually disliked him and actually hated him. I guess they just didn't measure up, and he outed them. He could be pretty critical. I mean, I watched him publicly dress down one of the priests for something that he said. The lady resigned the next day, and in my circle, his favor was sacrosanct, his blessing or no blessing. So I never really had to worry about what he thought about me, or I didn't think so. My older brother took all of the brunt of Pop's demands, but also his attention. I suppose now that was a good thing for me, but boy, it didn't feel that way at the time. He would take Mikey out to play ball over and over, pushing him to be better and better. And it worked. Mikey became all-state third baseman, given offers at 5 powerhouse schools. Yeah, I was jealous, not at his success. Mikey earned it. It was just that he took all of Pop's attention. I wasn't athletic, but maybe Pops and I would have found our thing too. Well, that's then. Don't want to bore you. This is now. Mikey was the one voted the most likely to succeed. One person wrote, the most likely to run the planet. I really looked up to Mikey. He was the whole deal. He was handsome, smart, successful in business. He ruled over an entire portfolio, along with my pops. My pops would brag to all of his friends about Mikey, and rightly so. But one day, Mikey crashed and burned. They didn't call it a suicide, no one is sure, but he had some kind of overdose, and, well, they wouldn't tell us much, and we didn't see his body either. It turns out that he had been an addict for a long time. Weed, coke, opioids, not to mention loads of exotic PEDs just to boost his performance on the field. I didn't know. How did I not know my brother, the person I knew the best, I suppose, was an addict? Me? I went the religious route. I was an altar boy, a good one. Then I became a leader in the church's singles group, always asked to pray about this or that issue in theology. I was just pretty good at all of that. I set my sights on being righteous and pure, too. I would do everything I could to be pleasing to my Father God. I wanted him to be happy with me and to, well, notice me, I guess. I went to seminary. I crushed it, became a pastor of a medium-sized church. And before long, we were massive. We had multiple campuses. I was the headliner of a CT article about the rise of the Gen Z church. People looked up to me. They paid attention. They took notes. Some even cried when I spoke. But something was wrong with my head, my inner wiring, I suppose. I was frenetic. I was driven. Just needing to do more and more and more and to do it better. And honestly, I see now that I was worried that God wanted me to be better, needed me to be better. And I can see now that I never thought I was enough. Yeah, that's the word, enough, to be loved by him. How? I can't say. I did all his word better than anyone I know. I'm not bragging, I'm just saying. So when I wasn't at the church or denomination meetings, my thoughts kept getting darker and more depressing. I think I began to see what made Mikey do drugs. He had to somehow get this drive, this need to succeed, to be noticed, out of his head and out of mine. I went to an offbeat conference by this evangelist who was making waves up north. I got to the church early, and I saw him. I knew it was him for the pictures on the web. He was out playing with the kids, playing chase, hide and go seek. He was on the dirt rolling around. Yeah, laughing, smiling. And kids, the boys and girls were having a great time. They couldn't get enough of him. He seemed to feel the same way towards them. Well, you can imagine I was pretty critical at that. I mean, I was even angry. I thought to myself, look at that side picture. This grown man is a minister, an evangelist is goofing around with kids when the adults are in here and he could be dialoguing with us, with me. I mean, that's why he was invited, right? And to see him, he was a mess. He was covered with dirt and grass. His wild hair was all disheveled in all directions. He was putting his hands on their heads and blessing them in the name of God, his Father. The kids were ecstatic that an adult would do that and say that and spend time with him. They just jumped on him again and laughed and dragged him to the ground. And all the while, this guy, the speaker, he was just laughing and crying out. But you know, then I felt sad. What is wrong with me? I can't do that. I won't do that. And yeah, I was jealous, you know, at the looks on the faces of the kids. They loved him and they loved his attention. Me, I sat there in the dark shadows of the building like some kind of stalker, just watching from a distance, an isolated, lonely, but wildly successful pastor, right? Did he see them as good enough to love? The kids? Why? Well, then, of course, he was 15 minutes late to take the podium. Isn't that disrespectful to us, to me? And the topic, was the love of God for the unlovable, the unloved, and the unlovely, which, I questioned anyway, but I was blown away. Not just by what he said, which was wonderful and disturbing, but the look on his face. He had the same look on his face that he had when he was rolling in the dirt with the kids. He was definitely excited to be there with us, with me. You could see it in his eyes, his smile, his gaze. He didn't want to be anywhere else or speaking to some other group of people. It was electric. You could feel it. I'm not the only one who thought so. He gave this poignant story about a very disrespectful addict who robbed his father, caught a bus to Vegas, spent it all in less than a week. Even though he had shown his father over-the-top disrespect, the father went to get him, bail him out, because he didn't even have enough bus fare to get back. He was hungry, he was filthy, impure, theologically, righteously. He was ashamed, and it just didn't matter to his father. His father just hugged him and told him through many tears how pleased he was to have his son back, as he was. Well, the speaker said that sometimes we get it confused about God the Father. He said that God the Father's DNA is to love messed up people, unrighteous, and impure people, he said. Sinners, And that's what he does. It's not just a thing with God the Father, it's his core thing. He chases down the broken, the runners, the failures, the unfaithful, the perpetrators, the dirty, the smelly, the victims, the migrants. He runs to them, embraces them as they are, and rescues them from whatever their brokenness and whatever their sense of loneliness might be. And as they are, and he said, without demanding anything, without requiring anything. Yeah, he said that unknowingly, all of us are acting out. We're emotionally dysregulating or disaffected, hurting others by largely subconscious reactionary brain wiring. Not all our fault, not usually because we're evil. It's usually because that is just how we've been wired after years and decades of disappointing relationships and hearts that are just hardwired to be emotional vacuums and fortifications. We're responsible for our actions, he said, and choices. But like I said, he made a point that it's not all our fault. Our brains make us do stuff. We hurt others and God. So often because our midbrains are acting out of miswired inner working models that are jonesing to be seen, appreciated, and loved. In fact, the speaker said he doesn't love good people more than he loves bad people. He went on, and this is what he said. People are not a lot different from children. They just want to be honored, appreciated, embraced, played with, laughed with, right? Noticed, adored as they are, not as they should be or could be. There was something off about what he said. I couldn't tell. My head said, what about the law? What about the Torah? What about God's purity? What about God's holiness? He demands perfection, right? Like my old man, right? What about all of the verses about discipline, about the fate of the unrighteous? Wasn't he enabling people to sin, to hurt people? My father would not have put up with this, that's for sure. I mean, he would have stood up and said something, because this is some kind of easy believism, right? No one gets loved by God the Father if they ignore his commands. God can't look upon sin, right? Well, so I was determined then and there to get an audience with him and to address these things. One of the breaks, I'm going to be there. This can't go on, I said. Well, I caught him after he had spoken and had gone to a coffee bar, and he liked cream and sugar with his cup a lot, by the way. So I moved up front and I said, Pastor, hey, good stuff out there. And I said that insincerely. And then I went to the point. Can I ask you a question? So, and I was still trying to pull my thoughts together so that I could ask the right thing. But I don't know what happened. The wrong question came out of my mouth. And I don't know who said this. How can I get God to love me like you love those kids? Yes, of course, he said, right to the point, my new friend. And his face just lit up the same as it did with the kids. His gaze was warm and maybe even disarming. And then he asked, can I ask you something too? Why did you say it was good stuff? Only the Bible is good after all, right? And only God the Father and his words are good in the highest sense, am I right? Is that what you meant? Yeah, I said, a bit. It is about good or being good, isn't it? So you know good then, he continued. You haven't murdered anybody or had an affair with some other man's wife. You honor your father and mother. Yeah, I think I said to him, I've been as good as anyone I know. And then the bombshell, he said, and yet you aren't sure if you are good enough to get God to love you or appreciate you or even notice all the hard work that you're doing on his behalf. Yeah, I wouldn't put it that way, but in general, I suppose that's it. You seem to be so sure. You seem to actually feel God, the Father's love for you, don't you? Oh, yes, I do. Can I ask you another question, maybe a little personal? Would you mind telling me about your father? What? My pops? Yes. Tell me a time, if you remember, when you really felt his love bursting out all over you as you were, not because of something you did right or something you said right, but just because he was madly in love with you, over you. Well, I thought. Nothing came to mind. So, a little defensive, I said, well, I just don't think we would, in my family, categorize love that way. He loved me, I'm sure, in other ways. He was always there. He was always pushing us to be better, more righteous, more pure. He pushed my brother even harder. He had an overdose a few years ago. Oh, I'm so sorry. So when you did what your pops wanted, did his face light up, his smile break out all over his face, and did he lavish praise on you for being the wonderful boy you are? Well, again, that wasn't his way. I know he loved me, but not the way you... I saw you watching me play with the children. What were you thinking? No, what were you feeling? Well, I was confused, actually. You didn't come here to play with the kids, did you? Well, yes. In a way, I was charged to come and proclaim the love of God, my Father, to the unlovable, the unloved, and the unlovely. And that's what I was doing with the kids. Many of them have never really experienced the love of God, my Father. They have now, Did you see their faces light up? Some were quite lonely. Some were isolated. Some had been bullied. Some had very busy parents. Some have very demanding fathers and mothers. They got it. Isn't that really why you're asking me that question? You said got it. They got what exactly? Well, the speaker's eyes just melted with obvious love for me. I could see it, but his reaction was quick and self-protective. I looked away. To this day, can't say why I looked away. I was afraid of something. And he answered, it's the love of God is what they got. For those whose subconsciouses are jonesing to hear him say, you are my beloved child with whom I am well pleased. Whose fractured, traumatized emotions need God to play in the dirt with them, so to speak, laughing with them, excited to be with them as they are, without any demands on his love, other than one. I just didn't get it. My friend, look at me. Look into my eyes for a moment. You are missing just one thing. One thing is in the way of you experiencing real love from your God. You are so close. And here's what I want you to do. Starting right now, I want you to join me on my speaking tour. I would be so honored. That's it. The bus leaves in about 15 minutes. We can stop by your house, get a bag. You can become my aide de camp, my assistant, my friend. Oh, wait, I'm a pastor. I got multiple churches that answer to me. I'm employed. They're counting on me. So follow me, my friend. You're a pastor who doesn't get the height and width and length and depth of the love of his son. What good is that? Well, I wouldn't put it that way. The truth is, my new friend, you're an addict. An addict? Yes, you are an addict to the law. It's going around. All of your childlike emotions want is your father to hug you and notice you, to feel his pleasure and favor. But since that doesn't happen, you substitute the dopamine hits that come from a reputation of being a righteous man, someone who keeps the law, who God would pat on the back if God ever did that. Your dad probably told you once or twice or 100 times that you were a good boy because you did something he commanded you to do. Maybe he patted you on the head, but either way, you were noticed and it felt good. Not as good as a father who rolled on the turf laughing with you, even if you weren't a so-called good boy. But a dopamine hit is a dopamine hit. And so you have pulled it off, being a doing good addict. It feels good to be noticed. It's hard work too, high standards. But in those still quiet moments, somewhere in your subconscious midbrain, you still think something is wrong, something is missing, something is off kilter. The righteousness attaboys aren't filling your identity cups anymore, and you know it. You want more. And unfortunately for you, you saw me, an expert on the love of God the Father, rolling in the dust with kids, showing them what love looks like, feels like, and your brain almost had a conniption fit. You want that to be true for you, but you would have to give up relying on your record of being good and all of the dope hits. It's a heady choice. Give up relying on your record for maybe being loved as you are. So I stared at him for almost an entire minute. He never looked away. I think that he really wanted me to come. Me. He didn't demand anything, if you do come, you need to do better at this or that. He was as transparent as anyone I ever saw. He really wanted to be with me and for me to be with him. You could see it in his eyes. For a moment or two or three, I did feel loved. I felt noticed, enjoyed, seen, appreciated. Those are just words that I have come to see since apply. But at the same time, they were all new feelings. I don't recall ever feeling them before or since. Well, you probably guessed I didn't accept the offer. Later, I sat in my Lexus hybrid in the dark, watching him and his entourage pack up his bus and drive off from the church. Many of the people heard him speak were in tears, not sadness, but joy. Lives were changed. Me, I've come to realize that my brain was hardwired, and maybe still hardwired, to link being lovable with being good. And I see now he was saying that it was the love of of God the Father that actually makes a person good. By the way, that's why I'm here tonight. I'm here to hear him speak again. And if he asks, and I hope he does, I'm ready to jump on that bus this time. I'm already packed. I'm scared, I tell you, but I'm more scared that he's not going to ask. It turns out that in spite of how my brain was programmed, it is too easy to receive God's love. We just have to believe we're unlovable. Do you know what I mean? The end. Let's talk about it after a few words from our sponsors. So here's the dialogue starters that I thought about. Did it make sense that Charlie was an addict to the law? I mean, ponder that in your brain, kick it around. Can you imagine a righteousness addict, dopamine hits and all? Kick it around. Next, but he wanted more. Charlie, put that in your own words. Can you relate? Have you found such a love for the unlovable for you? Whew. So if you like this Vagabond Diary, please like it, subscribe, forward the link to friends. Check out my fantasy books, the Kingdom Quest trilogy, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. If you want more info, go to author page, drbillsenior.com. Pass them on to kids in your life, 10 to 16. Get them to your church's youth group. Get them out there. I've also published a series for women groups that talks about the love of God for the unlovable. And in this case, it's 7 women who have historically been underappreciated, misunderstood, and overlooked, even though they're mothers of our faith in the Old Testament. It's called Dance Daughters of the Most High. It's fun. It's written just for those who feel unlovable and overlooked. Again, go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or drbillsenior.com. Check it out. We'll see you next time. Take heart, child of God.